In my early days of playing guitar, I was taught that I should strive for perfection. Play with a metronome, play with perfect hand position, perfect technique, perfect knowledge. Well, you know what? All of that is bull crap. Why? Because of this guy. I mean, listen to him. The way he plays is nothing but perfect. And yet, it sounds so perfect. I started playing in 1994, and at the time I wanted to be like my guitar heroes. I just wanted to play like them. Satch, Kirk Hammett, Slash. So I started learning songs and trying to replicate them as best as I could on my instrument. I also took a few lessons. I learned about chords, I learned about the good old minor pentatonic scale, proper fingering, and my instructor was pretty methodical. He had a step-by-step curriculum that all his students followed. And although that was beneficial for me to learn the basics, it also did something else. It kind of ingrained in my mind that there is one and only one way to learn guitar, and you should strive to master each step perfectly. You know how it is. When you learn something early on, it's really hard to stop thinking that way. And that was me. Anytime I wanted to learn something new on the guitar, or anytime I heard a guitar player, well, I had that filter. And I kept asking a series of questions to myself that would help me master what that player was doing. What is he playing here? What's the scale? What's the technique? What's the speed? How is he putting his fingers? While those questions helped me develop a better technique and understand what other players were doing, everything changed the day I heard this. It was November 4th, 2003, and a friend of mine let me borrow this Jeff Beck CD. And I loved it, but I didn't understand it because none of the playing really fit the rules that I had set to myself as I was developing my guitar skills. See, my analytical mind was trying to understand what Jeff was doing, but I just couldn't fit it in a box. I mean, listen to those notes. They're not really in pitch. And yet when I hear them, they make total sense. The reason that challenged me so much is that Jeff's playing was imperfect according to my old standards, and yet his music was just perfect. The more I listened to that album, the more I understood the concept of music as a language. See, language is a living thing. It's not set in stone. It's kind of a framework that people use to communicate with each other, but it's also a tool that could freely be used and altered. You'll still understand me if I use the wrong word, or if I have a little stutter every once in a while, or if some of my words are really soft. There's a lot of liberty when you're using that language, and that's what I was hearing in Jeff's playing. Back to my early days of learning guitar, I was kind of taught that music is a set thing. You've got to learn all your chord shapes, and those are the only ones you could use. There's only one way of playing a note perfectly, or the pick. I remember spending a long time trying to figure out, how do I hold the pick? What is the best way? And that's where I was wrong, because I was trying to put in a box something that is living. Music is a living language. So I realized that I had been working on music the wrong way all these years. I had to make a change, but I had no idea how to change it. So I did something quite counterintuitive. I took my guitar and I put it in its case. I had to figure things out in a different way. If music was a living language, guitar was only the tool by which to communicate that language. And I had to get very familiar with what it meant to have music as a living language. So I replaced all my time practicing guitar with listening to music. So I listened to a lot of Jeff Beck, of course, but also to all the other guys I had avoided for so many years, thinking that there's nothing I could learn from them. And I'm thinking Carlos Santana, Clapton, Albert King, you know, all the classic blues guys. That was really cool because it allowed me to discover a whole new aspect of music that I never really dived into before. Eventually, something really interesting happened to me. I started hearing things in my head, music that I had never heard before. Music that seemed familiar in a way, familiar because really it came from me, yet it's different because I never connected with the inner musician that is in all of us. It's almost as if I allowed that inner composer to come out and be free and whisper to me those musical secrets that I had been craving for so many years. Now, those things I heard were not things that I would have come up with on the guitar. They were not robotic, they were not pattern-based, they were not even guitar-friendly, and yet they were personal. Then came time to grab my guitar again and start implementing everything I had discovered. My practice changed quite a bit. Instead of working on speed, technique, theory, my only job was to replicate as best as I could on this instrument what that inner musician was whispering to me. All right, so how do you do that? Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it really works. First things first, you're gonna put your guitar down. That way you're not tempted to go back to those patterns and those scales and those shapes. You no longer think like a guitar player. Now, if you can, I recommend you go take a walk in nature or somewhere with no real distractions, somewhere you feel at peace and you can listen to the internal voice. Eventually you start hearing something, and most likely you're gonna be tempted to think that's too basic, that's lame. Don't do that. That's the idea, that's the nugget you're gonna take. Just keep repeating that idea in your mind. Not only listen, but also make it your own. Because the truth is, that idea came from you. You just need to make it more personal. So maybe you might wanna hum it, or try to make a little song out of it. Just be free and just enjoy what you're writing in your mind. Once you have a good idea of what that simple nugget of an idea is, try to imagine playing it. What does it feel like? What do the frets look like? Visualize in your mind what it would look like to play that idea on your neck. All right, now it's time to go back to your instrument. Grab your guitar, figure out how to play the notes. It's okay if it takes you a while. Note by note is okay. And then do the same exact thing you were doing on your walk. But this time, you're making the connection with the guitar. You're gonna repeat that simple idea several ways, add some emotion to it. How would that idea sound if it was a secret you're whispering? What would that idea sound like if you were to shout it? When you get the idea, you're taking that and saying it, speaking it, feeling it, using your guitar as an instrument. That's all it is. The bottom line is that you're trying to avoid approaching this in the traditional perfect way, just like Jeff is doing. Again, his playing is imperfect, which really makes it perfect. Now, the more I listened to Jeff Beck's music, I realized something else about his playing. There was a sense of musical development that was quite different from anything else I had heard before. It took me a while to understand what it was, but I finally realized that, you know what, I made a whole video of that, and you can watch it right here. I'll meet you in this video to learn what that secret is. Check it out.